Live with me, Arden Jones. I've been really excited this week because I get to meet and chat with the author illustrator David Litchfield. He is here waiting, so I'm going to bring him on right now. Hi, David.
Hi,
Hello. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. Not too bad. How are you doing, Arden?
Oh, really good, thank you. Loving actually getting to speak to people on Kidlit Live. It's great.
Oh,
So thank you so much for joining me. I was so excited when you said you'd like to come on. So
of
really
course,
happy.
it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it's because we met at the festival. It feels quite nice to catch up again. So I'm really pleased that you've come
Yes,
on.
we met so that was probably 2 years ago now at the
Yeah,
lovely.
so the last yeah, it was last year, wasn't it? Yeah. So this year I went to the one in
Oh,
Bristol, and then last year it was Winchester.
so
Yeah.
it was only just over a year ago. Blimey, time is working in very strange ways. But yes, it was the lovely I Am in Print festival.
Yes.
Although I don't think it was called that. Was it? Was it just called the right I am in right no, I Am in Print Writing
I
Festival.
Yeah, or I am writing. Was it I am writing? Oh, sorry,
Maybe I
Sarah and
Am Right.
Elaine, if you're watching. Yeah, we know what we mean.
Yes,
But
so
yeah,
those
how lovely. Sarah and Elaine are so lovely, aren't they? They're
oh,
just
they're fantastic.
yeah.
And yeah, I Am in Print. They are on Twitter and they run amazing festivals. And they've asked me a couple of times to be involved. And yeah, it was a great fun. It was a great weekend. And yeah, I got to meet you, Arden, and hear all your amazing ideas and so forth. So yeah, it was a fantastic weekend.
Yes, it really was. And this year was also brilliant. And we missed you there. I was like, is David coming this year?
I know, I couldn't. I was jet setting off to Croatia and
Oh,
places, so
nice.
I missed it unfortunately. But who knows? Hopefully next year, wherever they are, because they travel around the country, don't they, in lots of
They
different places.
do. Yeah. I think there was talk they might be doing it again in Bristol. I think they a lot of people liked it there. So
Nice.
that was good. It was a good venue actually, and it was really
Was that
easy to
where
get
it was?
to.
It was in Bristol, wasn't it, this year? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
It's a
Bristol's
nice,
just
a
cool,
lovely
isn't it?
city.
It's a
Yeah.
cool
Yeah.
city. Lots of cool things happen in Bristol,
Yes. I
including
mean, I
that
didn't
festival.
get to see much outside of it because I was basically in
Sure,
the hotel, but
sure.
I did go out a few times.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so obviously I was in your workshops and I got to learn a lot of the questions I'm going to ask tonight, but I thought they were so interesting that I'd like to share with the people that are watching.
That sounds
Um,
good.
so I think we'll get started. So the first question is what I ask everyone that comes on. Have you always known that you wanted to be an illustrator and an author?
So, have I always known that I want to be an author and illustrator? I think I've always known that I wanted to be an illustrator, even before I knew what an illustrator was. Um, so growing up, I always used to draw. I used to make comics for my older brother and sister. They're a lot older than me. So my sister is 6 years older than me. My brother is 7 years older than me. So I was a little bit of an annoyance to them when I was really little. And what I found was when I drew them pictures and when I drew them comics and stuff, that was the main time that they actually seemed to like me and actually want to talk to me and not, just tell me to go away and stop annoying them. We'd actually sit and go through the comics and talk about them and stuff. And that was a big learning moment when I was about 6 or 7, in that I learned, that the art that we do kind of matters, and it can affect people, it can change people's moods, it can change people's opinions. So that was a big lesson for me growing up. So I always knew that there was a power to drawing and there was a power to being an illustrator or to illustration. But I never fully grasped that it could actually be someone's job to actually illustrate things and to be a storyteller until very late on when you know, I think it was, in fact, I know when it was. Well, it wasn't that much later on. I was about 10 or 11. And people were starting to talk about what they wanted to do when they're older, and be a football player or be an astronaut or anything like that, be a soldier. And I was just like, well, I don't know what I want to do. And then I just go back to my drawing books and kind of just carry on drawing and doodling and coming up with characters and stories and things. And then I read a book. It was called The Complete Asterix. So it was about Asterix the Gaul, those great French comic books. And I remember I got it out from the library. My nan got it out from the library from me. And I remember going through that book, and there were some great pictures of Albert Uderzo, who is the illustrator of Asterix, in his studio, like surrounded by paper and pens and just drawing. And I just thought, wow, that's that man's job. That's what he does every single day. And it just looked like a really happy life. Just to go into the studio, every morning and just draw all day until tea time. And I think that's the point where I thought being an illustrator would be pretty cool, basically. And then being an author totally took me by surprise. That wasn't until much later. Although I went to art school, basically, did lots of art subjects, but graphic design, I focused on graphic design because I come from quite a working class family. So I was the first one to go to university, go to college, go to all of that. And I think my mum was very sort of skeptical about following art as a career. Whereas graphic design, she could kind of think, okay, that's kind of, out of all of the creative industries, that's probably the most sensible. And to be honest, she's probably right, because there is, there's a very definite kind of career path to being a graphic designer. So I focused on graphic design, but and it was great because I learned all about Photoshop and Illustrator and all these kind of different computer programs. But I really miss drawing, and I really miss pencils and pens and stuff. So yeah, I always carried on drawing throughout all of that. And then I did get some work as graphic designer, and then I went and taught graphic design. And it wasn't until I was getting quite old, Arden, and I don't want to age myself, but I was approaching the big 3-0.
It was
And
like ages ago for me. I'm like,
oh my goodness, it's getting further and further away. And it's ridiculous, right? Because now 30 seems so young, and I'm like, there's so many people that don't know what they want to do when they're 30, don't know, their careers haven't necessarily started. But I was approaching the big 30, and I was teaching and earning a lovely wage, and all these grown-up things were happening. We were saving for a house, and we just had our first child and stuff. So me and my wife, we just had our first child. And then I thought, no, if I'm going to do this, I need to do this now. So I quit my job teaching and became an illustrator. And by within a few months, I also became an author, which was completely unknown. Because one of my first meetings with a publisher, they said, "Oh, do you also write?" And I said, "Well, I come up with stories." And they said, "Great, let's come up with a story idea." So yeah, in a nutshell, going back to the original question, I've always known I wanted to be an illustrator, but yeah, being an author, even though it is kind of a byproduct about what we do, we work in kind of storytelling and books and things. But being an author was a bit of a shock, and didn't come much later.
well, I mean, I'm a huge fan of all your books. I mean, I've done my real early. I don't know if you got to see that. There's like loads of your books that we have, so we're huge fans. As is so many people that are going to be watching tonight. We've had lots of messages and questions to ask you. So if we have time, we'll ask a couple of those.
Brilliant.
But yeah, I absolutely love your books, as does my daughter Willow, as you know.
Willow.
We've got Pip and Egg, and you've done your own illustration of Pip and Egg in there. And I personally, I mean, I love everything about your illustrations, but the use of light, it's so stand out. And it is amazing. So what inspires you to draw in this style? Have you always kind of used light, or is this it's amazing?
There's a couple of things that kind of inspire me to sort of play around with light. Like, I really enjoy using light. I use it for a number of different reasons, and it kind of I've always used light ever since I was at school. Like, the first most important time that I started using light was I had this great teacher called Mr. White at my upper school, Hastonsbury Upper School, who was my art teacher, my favorite all-time teacher. Fantastic man, fantastic artist. And I mean, it sounds so obvious now, but he said, "Look, David, you're really good at drawing, but there's a thing that you can do that can just make it kind of take it that step up, and it's just to think about light." And he got a rubber, and it was one of my pencil drawings, And he said, do you mind me having a go on this? And I was like, no, fine. And then he started just rubbing stuff out on my drawing. I was like, oh my goodness, what are you doing? This drawing that I was really proud of.
No.
Yeah, but he was literally just getting the rubber and just kind of highlighting where the light would fall on this. It was a picture of it was like in an alleyway, like very kind of film noir kind of picture, just of this man in this alleyway, and it was very dark. And he was like, look, imagine that there's a source of light coming from here, and he just rubbed all around this guy's sort of body, and it just blew my mind. And it's kind of obvious, really, because it was just like where the light would fall, we'd rub the whole thing out, so it looked like, the highlight was hitting this character. And it literally just took my drawing, which was pretty good, into something, really good. And it was just looked really realistic and really 3D. And so that was an eye-opener, and I was like, wow, light really does, light and shade, finding the balance between those really can kind of take your artwork into a different area. So I've always had that in my mind. And then also it's just, I'm a big fan of Steven Spielberg, the filmmaker Steven Spielberg that everyone knows. For a number of reasons. I love his film. E.T. is one of my favorite films. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, inspired some of my books and stuff. But the way that Steven Spielberg uses light, I find really inspirational. Light is almost a character in itself in his films. There's a beautiful thing in Close Encounters of the Third Kind where the door opens and the little boy is just bathed in light, and it's just, I don't know, and there's no words spoken, but it's really sort of, it's really moving the narrative on, just that use of light, and there's a really hopeful kind of feel to the light. And using light as a way of helping the audience kind of follow the narrative, I think is what I took most from Steven Spielberg. And I definitely do that. In fact, with Pip and Egg, the opening spread is them in the forest. Oh, here we go. Oh, look at this. It's as if we planned this. Yeah, I use a lot of light in that book. So the opening spread, I don't know if, that one. So I don't know if you can pick it up, but there's a kind of a beam of light coming in from the left. What are we doing? I know we're swapping it around, but basically coming in from the side where there's no text. And there's quite a lot going on in that image. There's foliage, there's kind of plants, there's trees, but your main focus needs to be this tiny little Pip and Egg. So I thought if I put the beam of light, like highlighting that, almost like a spotlight on a stage, your eye is automatically sort of drawn to that. And I think I quite like doing that. I quite like using light to kind of highlight where I think, as the illustrator and or author, where I think your attention should go. I find that quite a helpful kind of narrative tool, I guess, in my drawings.
Well, you said it was obvious. You're like, yeah, it's pretty obvious. But I'm like, is it? Like, I'm not artistic in any way. I literally cannot draw. So that, to me, I'm like, wow, that's amazing that you'd even think that.
Yeah,
but yeah, like, I suppose it's photography and anything artistic. If you use that.
I guess it's because, like, one of the first, like, this is, so how old was I? I was about 15, maybe 16, maybe a bit younger. But it's when we sort of like specialized in our subjects at school, or we picked our favorite subjects, and so art was getting a bit more serious, and it was kind of one of the first things that we were taught was like, use shade and light in we'd draw a ball and we'd make sure we get the shading right. And I never fully appreciated what we were doing or how effective it was, and I probably couldn't get it that right. So I was just like, oh, I just want to draw silly pictures. And then it was just this simple technique where he just very brutally took away a lot of the detail and a lot of the shading. And so that's probably why it felt obvious, because it was like we'd probably been taught it 100 times, but that was the first time that I kind of saw it really, really having an effect on what I was doing.
Yeah, I mean, it really does. When I look at all the books that you've illustrated, you can really see like how you use it, and it makes me just appreciate it so much more, because I mean, I appreciate it anyway, but just seeing what you do, and like what you said, when you're using it as a spotlight onto what you want people to focus on, it really comes through and it really shows. So I think we'll talk about your multi-award-winning book, The Bear and the Piano, which it's now a trilogy. I mean, I would like to know if there's going to be any more, but the question that I thought I'd ask is how you came up with the idea and how it was acquired by Francis Lincoln Children's Books.
So I came up with the idea. In fact, I have it here. So sketchbooks are very important for me. So I always have a sketchbook with me, and I'm always, well, as much as possible, I'm doodling and kind of, you know, drawing in them, and just not really thinking about what I'm drawing, and just sort of see what comes out, which I sort of find is quite a good way of coming up with ideas. It's kind of free form doodling. You know, 99% of the time it'll be awful, and then, you know, 1% you'll be like, oh my goodness, that's brilliant. So yeah, I was doing that one day, and this is before. So I think I'd just been signed up to my illustration agency, Bright Illustration, and yeah, I was just drawing in my book. Very, very scruffy, sketchy drawings. Where is it? This is the right sketchbook, isn't it? Yes, it is. And I drew. Was it the right sketch? Yes, I drew this. So I drew a very scruffy
Wow.
of a bear playing the piano. You know, really odd looking bear, very out of proportion, very bizarre. And so that was 2014. Like I say, I was sort of, you know, I was thinking up ideas and stuff and just drawing. And yeah, that came out. I didn't, you know, I thought it was quite interesting. I thought, you know, I'd never seen a bear play the piano before, and I just started to think about what the story could be behind this drawing. You know, how did the bear learn to play the piano? What kind of adventures does it go on? That kind of stuff. So yeah, the idea started to form in my head, and I kind of had the whole narrative, and I was kind of making more sketches and kind of making notes and stuff in my sketchbook. You know, thinking the idea through, nothing too defined. And then yeah, so I'd just been signed to Bright. I'd been developing this other idea for a book called Grandad's Secret Giant, which I was thinking would be my first picture book, because I was so confident with it. I was so like, this is a brilliant idea. You know, I'm sure they're going to go. You know, I'm sure a publisher is going to be interested in this. And then Bright got me my first ever interview meeting with a publishing company, which was Francis
It
Lincoln
feel a bit
Children's.
like an interview, to be fair.
I was very nervous. I didn't know what to expect. You know, I went to see them, and luckily the lady I met was called Katie Cotton, and luckily she was and still is absolutely lovely. You know, a really lovely, friendly person. So I was sort of instantly at ease when I met her. And we started talking about, you know, what ideas I had, and I started telling her about this Grandad's Secret Giant. You know, I had some drawings, which I think I showed you, didn't I? And you know, they were quite weird kind of drawings of a giant, like half naked giant, like hiding in the sea, and it was all a bit too scary and a bit odd for children's books. And that's exactly what.
You could do an older version.
Well, maybe, yeah, but even that, you know, it was kind of nightmare fuel, because this giant looked really odd and scary at the time. And then yeah, Katie said that. She said that's too scary. You can't do that. You know, that wouldn't work. And then she said, "Do you have any other ideas?" And thankfully, I brought my sketchbook along, and I showed her that picture, the bear playing the piano, and kind of that's all I kind of had, apart from these other little notes and little doodles. I don't think I even had a treatment, or a kind of a synopsis even. But I kind of had it all in my head what I wanted to do. So I started pretty much kind of acting the whole book out in front of her, and must have looked like an absolute weirdo, you know. And I was making all these kind of bear noises and going, and then the bear finds a piano and he goes, ooh, doo, 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 doo. It was all very surreal, and you know, it kind of Mr. Tumbles turned up in her office. But it worked, because she was like, that's really nice, I really like that idea, and let's see where that can go. And you know, she sent me away, and she sort of said, look, this is the kind of story we'd like to tell at Francis Lincoln. And so something in that sketch, and something in the notes, and something in me acting like an absolute fool kind of charmed her, really. And I remember I left, so that was my first ever meeting with a publisher, anyone in publishing. You know, it's definitely my first meeting with an editor of a publishing company. And I remember leaving that meeting and thinking, oh, that felt like something, you know, something big just happened there. You know, because she basically said, look, if you can, that story's great. If you can get some artwork, you know, do a couple of spreads, she's like, I'm pretty sure we can commission that.
Oh, mate, that's amazing.
Yeah, I remember, you know, it was the middle of the day, and I was in London, and, you know, I rang my wife and I said, oh, I think they want to make books and with me and stuff. Um, and you know, I got a bit tearful. I was like, this could be something really good and really exciting. And then I was like, I need to go and celebrate. But I was in London. My wife was in Bedford. I did, you know, everyone was at work. Um, so I went to Starbucks on my own and had a sausage sandwich. That was the way I celebrated kind of that big momentous occasion in my life. But it felt right, and it was a good sausage sandwich. So you know, it wasn't too bad. So yeah, that's kind of it really. And then I can't believe it. That book, you know, that was 2014, and then for the next year, it was just like one of the greatest years of my life because I was, you know, I was making this book, I was learning. You know, I sort of consider the Bear and the Piano to be like my MA in sort of book or children's book kind of creation because I just learned so much about how to make a book. You know, all the kind of how many pages are in the typical picture book. You know, what to kind, you know, how to cut out bits that are not necessary, how to streamline it all.
I think you kind of break the rules of how many spreads in a picture book, though. I think
Well, I
you
don't
tend to
know
have
how
quite
I
a lot
got
more
away
than
with
we're
that.
allowed.
I don't know how I got away with that really. So the Bear and the Piano is like what is it, 16 spreads? So oh, my maths is terrible. So what's that, 30, 38? Yes, no, yes, 38.
Oh God, I can actually do maths, but I've totally gone brain. It's
34.
not working. Yeah.
34.
Which, I mean, they're usually 32. So if we had another 4, that
I
would
get a
be.
couple of extra pages in Bear and the Piano basically, and I don't know how. I was just jammy, I guess. Like, and we did have to actually cut a few out as well. So
Oh, really?
yeah, there was one spread that I really loved. Like it was only in sketch form of the bear, and it's when he's sort of running back to the forest. Spoiler alert! To kind of go back to his friends. And there's one shot which was really inspired by like King Kong, of him sort of bounding through the city and all the kind of, you know, the kind of Empire State Buildings behind him and everything. And I really loved that. I thought that's a really exciting one. That's going to look great. And we was like, look, we have to be brutal. You've got too many pages, and this seems like the most logical one to go because, you know, it doesn't really move the story on, like, you know, he does that in the next spread as well, essentially. So yeah, we had to cut it out. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know how I got away with that many pages, but there you go.
Well, I think it's obviously because your illustrations are amazing and the story as well. It's that story. Well, it's just a brilliant book, isn't it? So no one's going to want to get rid of any of those spreads. But it must have been hard
Well,
even for Francis Lincoln to want to take that out as well. But they want the even amount of printed pages, I guess. So
yeah,
I have that exact.
there's, you know, that there's a lot of kind of reality that comes into it. Then it's stuff like, you know, the printing pages, and you know, it does actually probably cost a fair bit more just to have like one more spread. And but you know, I'm in many ways I'm pleased that we did, because that, again, that was all a learning curve, because it's like, okay, when you're making these books, you know, I mean, we have to kind of work within quite strict boundaries anyway. You know, it's a very short form way of telling a story, which is, you know, at the beginning, I was like, how am I going to tell this epic story in such a, you know, few amount of pages? But now I actually really enjoy that. I enjoy those sort of challenges, those boundaries. And I actually enjoy the editing process where I'm like, okay, how can I be brutal and how can I really streamline this story so it really sort of flows as well as it could? And, you know, when I'm planning a story, I sort of put all that to the back of my mind and just kind of go, right, just get the story out and just, you know, all the sketches. Don't really even consider too much about the page count. Just let the story sort of, you know, develop as it would. And then I go back and sort of think, okay, now I need to be a bit brutal and kind of get my editing scissors out and kind of, you know, cut pages and cut elements of the story. But that's all part of the process, really.
Yeah. You just said something which just made me think. Like, so when we're writing, we're often asked that, well, are you a plotter or are you a pantser? That's quite a common thing that writers are asked. But you just said that when you're planning. So do you always plan how you want it, or do you just let yourself just go free with
So
illustrating?
I do plan it. Yeah, I kind of storyboard it, like very roughly storyboard it out. It's a combination, really. It's. Do you know what? And every book is different. It's kind of a complete mess, but in kind of a nice way. It's like I'll make notes, I'll sketch, I'll, you know, Sometimes stick this post-it notes on my wall and kind of plot it out that way. Whatever just sort of feels to is going to work in the moment. But usually it'll be like I'll draw very rough storyboards, like thumbnail storyboards. Again, not paying too much attention to how many pages I should be working, and just to sort of get the story out of my head onto page. And then go back and kind of hone it all in and kind of cut bits out, and that's all before I've kind of, well, usually that's before I've even sort of talked to the editor, and then I'll do another version where it's a little bit more tied in, a little bit more kind of streamlined, that I'll take to the editor. And even then, after then, it'll come back and the editor will have some thoughts, and so it goes back and forth a number of times, really. But yeah, I think that's kind of the process that I really enjoy. I really enjoy that period, the kind of planning fun stages where you're just being really sketchy and really free, and it's kind of a very creative period of the project, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, and it's good because, like you said, obviously you enjoy the whole editing side of it as well. And I do when it comes to picture books anyway. I'm not enjoying my editing of my novel, but
Right.
picture books, yeah, I love, and exactly what you said. I love sort of getting right down into the bones and just taking, if that needs to be, does that need to be in there? If it doesn't, you can take it out. It's quite freeing, that as well, isn't it? I
Yes.
find.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I never thought it would be. Being kind of creative people, I think we're automatically kind of control freaks and kind of but I never thought it would be that freeing, kind of doing that. I thought, no, this is my project, this is my baby. I know exactly how it should be. All these people that have been professional, publishing people for decades. What do they know? But it's funny how you just sort of go, oh yeah, no, that does work. That's completely right how it should be.
So when I started originally, when I was advertising people to come onto Kidlit Live, originally it was to help authors and illustrators that are in like the querying stages, because it's hard. I know what it's like as a writer, but what's it like querying as an illustrator? Can you tell us a little bit how that is and how you found your agent, the Bright Agency?
So, I found my agent, and again, I sometimes think I might have been a bit jammy, but I think there's so many different routes into this industry. But I found my agent found me on Twitter, actually, because and it is actually, so one of those, so the drawing that I did of Grandad's Secret Giant, the original one, which is a bit scary and a bit weird, I put that on Twitter just as I started the project. So I started that project before I'd got anywhere near an agent, got anywhere near a publisher. I just thought I need to sort of think of an idea, and I did this image and I put it on Twitter, and it got shared a lot because it was quite an unusual image. That story did go on to become a book, but it wasn't my first book. It turned out to be my second book where I made it. Yes, and you've got it up.
I'll show it.
Well, actually, look, I've got the giant here as well. Look, so there he is.
Oh, wow.
That's what he became. There he is. Look at that. So he became a lot more friendlier than the one that was original, which was he was bald and semi-naked and just kind of weird looking. But yeah, we tidied him up. We made him a lot more friendly, and he did eventually become in one of my books, which is one of my personal favorite books. Anyway, the original image went around Twitter, and yeah, my agent Anne Moore Armstrong, who works at Bright Agency, she really liked it, and we got chatting on Twitter and stuff. And then they invited me in to show my portfolio at the Bright offices in London, and it went from there, really. And having an agent is it's something that I would always recommend to people, to whether you're a writer or an illustrator. I would recommend that should be your first port of call, is to try and find an agent. Now, there is obviously, they have a bit of a bad rep sometimes, agents, because they do take a bit of your money. But the bonus is that they do obviously get you the better jobs, the better paid jobs, and they open so many doors for me that just wouldn't be opened if I wasn't signed to Bright. Like I say, I grew up in Bedford, which is a lovely town, but there's no real strong links to any kind of big creative industries, or there wasn't at the time. Definitely no links to the publishing world. You know, I don't have a rich uncle who owns a publishing company or anything like that. So I just wouldn't have access to kind of getting those meetings. But Bright do, and most illustration and kind of, you know, literary agencies, they will have access to those kind of companies. And yeah, with that, so meeting Katie Cotton was my first meeting, which Bright set up, and you know, I haven't looked back since then. So I do find having an agent really helpful. Some people don't. Obviously, it's all a personal thing. But yeah, I do find having an agent really helpful. And in terms of like, you know, now that I'm a few books in, kind of pitching new ideas. I mean, again, I don't know if this is true of everyone, but because I have such a great relationship with kind of, you know, Francis Lincoln, and you know, The Bear and the Piano did quite well, or you know, did very well, not to be too immodest. um I do feel that, you know, they're very open to hear new ideas, basically. And I think once you've got that kind of relationship with the publisher, it does become a lot easier to kind of pitch ideas. And you know, and some of the books that I've done with Francis Lincoln, so I did The Bear and the Piano was my first one, and then I think because Bear and the Piano did quite well, they allowed me to kind of experiment a little bit more with something like Grandad's Secret Giant, or you know, push the boundaries a little bit with it. Even though we did kind of make it a lot more family friendly and a lot more child friendly. And then I did, like you said, it became the Bear and the Piano became a trilogy. So I did a second book after that. I did Bear, the Piano, the Dog, and the Fiddle, which again did very well. And then after that, I did Lights on Cotton Rock, which again was a bit more kind of an unusual children's book, perhaps touching on darker themes and stuff. But because the Bear and the Piano books were doing well, and then I did a third one after that, so you know, they knew that they were getting a steady stream of books that should do okay. I think they kind of allowed me to take a bit more of a risk and a bit more of a chance with some of the other books. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, whether you're, you know, starting off or whether you're a bit more established, I think a good idea is a good idea, and it's just, I guess that's probably the most important part of what we do. You know, having ideas that are interesting and, you know, capture people's imagination, you know, that's worth so much more than being, you know, an experienced writer, or an amazing writer, or an amazing illustrator. You know, there's far better illustrators out there. There's definitely far better authors out there than me. But you know, having an idea like The Bear and the Piano, which is so simple at its core and kind of, you know, really did capture people's imagination for whatever reason. And you know, it's still going strong, that book. You know, there's all kinds of exciting things happening with that book, and it's still kind of going all around the world and stuff. You know, and that's like
So
8 years ago
amazing.
that came out, which is incredible.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a bit of so many of us that kind of always wish, like, we'd love for that big, massive thing to happen, like him going off and playing well around the world. With this, you know, I think growing up, especially when you're children, you want to. Everyone thinks they want to be famous. They want to be these huge stars, and Bear does that. Like, so
Yeah,
that really,
I
I think,
know.
resonates with children and adults. So I think that's another
Yeah,
reason why it's done so well.
I mean, that's another one of the great things about working in, you know, being a children's book illustrator and author, is that you kind of, a lot of your own story, or I find I try and put a lot of my own story into these, you know, books about bears and UFOs and things. You know, there's a lot of myself in that bear, and not the fact that I'm slowly turning into the bear, you know, as I get older. Um, but
Do you play piano
there
as
is, you
well?
know, you know, like, and again, whether it's one of those things that I realize I'm doing while I'm writing it, or it's kind of, you know, just in the back of my head. But you know, someone said, "Oh, this story's a bit, you know, a bit like you, where you know, you sort of come out of a small town and you kind of pursue your dreams, and you know, I had to, you know, move to London and sort of traveled and stuff to kind of make it as an, you know, as a creative person or whatever." Um, you know, I can't play the piano at all, and you know, but you know, there's a lot of kind of the kind of pursuing your dreams. I think is a very universal story, and that's definitely part of what Bear does. And he has to kind of step out of his comfort zone and leave his familiar surroundings to kind of pursue it. And You know, the idea that, you know, I'd moved around, but I always had this sort of, you know, love, you know, this base of friends and base of families back in my hometown that I could always come back to, and, you know, just feel natural and feel relaxed and kind of tell them all the stories about what I've been doing. You know, that was always a source of comfort for me, even when I was at university, you know, at art school and things. So yeah, there's a lot of that in The Bear and the Piano. And I guess that's kind of the, you know, I don't know, I don't know if that's a secret or not, but that's definitely something that I encourage authors to do, is to kind of, you know, think about their own story and see where they can run with it, basically.
That's, yeah, I think that's a really, really good tip. I think a lot of us are really trying to just write to get a book out there. But if you write what's inside you and you write what you love, or you write what resonates with you, that will show, I think, in
Yeah.
your writing, and
Oh,
that is more likely to
100%.
get interest, I think, rather
Yeah.
than just trying to find something that
Yeah.
fits within a gap or what's sort of trending at the moment. I
Oh,
think
100%. And I also think, you know, like, if you're truly passionate about this subject, that really comes through in the writing, and that will definitely be something that, you know, an editor will notice and a publisher will notice. But more importantly, that will be what a child reading it will notice. You know, they'll really, if it resonates with you, it will resonate with them. I think, you know, even though, you know, the likelihood of a child having experience kind of, you know, what bears experience, or what, you know, going off and, or maybe they have, I don't know, but I think, yeah, I think you're right. You know, looking at trends, looking at all that kind of stuff, I would say, if possible, leave that to the marketing people and leave that to the publishing people, and just write from your heart, definitely. And, you know, I mean, that's how trends start, isn't it? People break boundaries and do something different, and then everyone
and
else
it
wants a
might
piece of
work.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Mm.
absolutely.
I mean, because you mentioned something just now about like some cotton rock, that it sort of tackles some darker themes, but I feel like publishers are now, and I think for a little while, have been more open for doing that. So there's like, obviously, the Shelter for Sadness is another one that I think, like, children need these stories. It's really important, and it's not just there for like a commercial reason. It's there to help
I think so.
children.
I think so. And again, that's one of the absolutely lovely things about working in this industry, is how, um, I mean, I don't remember reading books like that when I was growing up, and I think I can absolutely see that I would have, you know, I could have used reading books like Shelter for Sadness and all these great books that are coming out, talking about kind of, you know, looking after your mental health, and, um, you know, just kind of checking in on yourself for, you know, at whatever age you are. Um, and the great thing about it is, and this is what I tried to do with Shelter of Sadness, which is written by Anne Booth, who is one of my, you know, a lovely collaborator to have. Um, uh, so we came up with this. Well, Anne came up with the story, and you know, we worked together on it. And I really wanted it to still feel like it was, someone could read it and still have a sort of a source of escapism while reading this book. You know, it's still very much, you know, got this kind of picture book feel to it, but it's really tackling these very real emotions that, you know, like you say, yeah, you know, children are very much feeling now. I've been feeling, you know, for all time, but
Mhm.
you know, we're obviously, you know, been through a lot recently as a world, and, you know, children have been suffering the most, you know, missing school, missing their friends during the pandemic, and then, you know, a lot of uncertainty since then. And I think these books can be very helpful in kind of them organizing those kind of thoughts and feelings and emotions that they're all having at the moment. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Um, I mean, because you do a lot of collaboration. You just mentioned Shelter for Sadness with Anne Booth. So, and I think a lot of us writers, we worry so much about what do we need to put when we're writing, when we're thinking about an author illustrating it. So I feel quite comfortable with illustration notes now. I used to have loads, and now I'm like, I know what I need. But what are they like for you? Are you all good for illustration notes, or are you
I
like,
mean,
just no,
yeah.
let me just be free with what I can see?
Well, do you know what? For me, I mean, other illustrators will probably have a different answer to this, but I am okay with Illustrator notes. I find them very helpful. However, having said that, you know, a lot of the projects that I've done, I would say 50% of the projects that I've done, the author will have notes for me. And they're usually quite vague, and I kind of appreciate the vagueness. They're like, oh, well, maybe here we can see, you know, that they're standing in the street and there's, you know, it's very dark and something, oh, something like that. You know, stuff that the text doesn't necessarily say on its own. And then I've had other projects where there's no Illustrator note. In fact, some projects I've had are literally, you know, a poem or you know, just a very kind of non-specific text, and they've just been like, see what you come up with, and let's just talk. let's talk afterwards. And I'm really happy doing both ways, really. I mean, there's benefits to both. The Illustrator text I find helpful because it's like, okay, this author really knows exactly what he or her wants out of this book. You know, they've got a clear vision, and let's try and do that. And you know, I'm not there to kind of question it as an illustrator, especially when it's like, you know, when it's a collaboration. I'm definitely there to question it when it's my story and my characters, because you know I've kind of earned the right to do that because I created them. Whereas with the author, I sometimes think, you know, they've got this specific idea. It's my role now to kind of bring that to life and kind of visualize that for them. But then on the other side, I can be like, okay, let's go wild. Like, there's no rules. The kind of, you know, there's no notes at all. Let's just go for it. And you know, 9 times out of 10, it will be like, oh, that's great. Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Let's go like that. Or sometimes I'll be like, oh, okay, that wasn't quite what I was thinking. Do you want to try again? Or, I mean, the main key is just to communicate with both author and illustrator should communicate, and that can just be, you know, I work with a lot of American authors, and it's not feasible to meet in person, but you know, in the world we live in, we have emails, we have Zoom, we have all sorts of things. So I think an initial chat at the start, initial chat in the middle, and then an initial chat at the end of the process is kind of an essential thing, and more if you can. But you know, working with an author, it's just, you know, it's a collaboration, and I love collaborating. I love you know, finding that sweet spot where it's like, you know, the author's got this idea, you've got an idea, you put them together, and it's almost like something new comes from putting those ideas together, something that both of you didn't kind of think about. That's kind of when real kind of magic happens, because it's like, you know, you're like, oh, that's awesome, you know. So yeah, in a nutshell, I really don't mind authors' notes for illustrators. Like I say, I don't know if that's the case for everyone. I find them really helpful. But essentially, even whether there's, you know, a collaboration should be, you know, a happy, finding that happy kind of middle ground where, you know, the magic really happens. Does that all make sense? I felt like I rambled then.
Yeah.
I think
No,
I know what I'm talking
it
about.
absolutely, yeah, it absolutely does make sense. And like, I think from my perspective, it's really helpful. But also, I also know that a lot of the times, I think authors and illustrators are just spoke to, like, so the publisher is in the middle, and you don't
Yes.
always get that sort of
Yes.
connection to be able to have
Yeah.
that chat, which I think maybe early on is probably a good idea if we're
I think so.
still not go, like, we're so excited, like, especially
Yeah.
with our first books, we just want to know what it's going to look like, and we'd probably be like on the illustrator's case a bit too much. So I think it's a good idea to have the publisher sort of going, no, okay, I'll
Yeah.
do this. I think
Yeah.
that
And
can help as
there's
well.
usually an art director who is sort of the middle person, but there's only been one book that I've made. So I've made 27 books now, which is bonkers in itself, really. But there's only been one book where I've literally never spoke to the author, and I probably won't. I probably shouldn't tell you who it was, so I won't. But it's, yeah, one of the books I never spoke to the. I, you know, still haven't spoken to the author. But that, I think, is a very rare occasion, and you know, that's just the way they work, and maybe they're very shy. Who knows? But every other one, I've usually spoke to them, and you know, a couple of times in person, because you know, they're in England, but the ones in America via Zoom or whatever. So yeah, it's whatever works for each project basically is the best way.
Yeah, and I suppose once the book's finished and it's out there, you're more likely to have some more communications because you're out there doing events possibly together, like virtual or
Yeah,
in person as well now. So
yes,
that's all good if
yeah,
you can.
yeah. Mainly through via Zoom with the because, like I say, quite a few of the authors are based in America. But yeah, yes, you do. You get to have some fun with the authors at bookshops and book events and things, which is always good fun.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait for that. I'm so excited.
Oh, you're going to be great at it. Fantastic. Like it's a weird one. Like I didn't even consider that when I was starting out. That that was part, or that could be part of being an illustrator. Was kind of going to events and sort of being a child entertainer for an hour or so. But it is lovely. I mean, it's one of those things that at the start I was doing lots and lots and just saying yes to everything, because I kind of thought I had to. So I was traveling all around, and I was doing drawing, and I've got my friend Rebecca to help a lot of the time because she plays piano and she bless her, she doesn't mind dressing as a bear and yeah.
Brilliant.
Which
Are there
I
pictures?
still
I'd
do a
love to see.
few.
I'd love to see some footage
Oh,
or
it was
pictures or
good
something.
fun. We did lots of
Yeah.
festivals and stuff, and did Edinburgh, but
Oh, wow.
you kind of quickly realize that actually that's kind of getting in the way sometimes of actually doing what I'm in this industry to do, which is make books and things. So I've had to cut back on quite a few of those, and unfortunately I had to say no to a few big kind of festivals and things just because deadlines are fast approaching and stuff. Um, but yeah, it is part of being an author or illustrator, but you don't have to do it as much as I did at the start, definitely.
And I think I remember we spoke about in the workshop that we did at the festival was coming up with new ideas. I think the workshop was actually creating new ideas, wasn't it?
Yes.
Um, and I've had a question actually from someone else come in. They would like to know where you get your inspiration from and how you come up with these ideas. So yeah, I found it really interesting. I loved your workshop, and it's definitely helped me. Although, like I said earlier, I'm still trying to write this story that I have.
Well,
But
that I mean, that is the trickiest thing. Like ideas, like I say, that's the most important thing about what we do is coming up with ideas and making sure that they're interesting and catch people's imagination. And to be honest, I know I ran a whole workshop on it and I talk about it, but I still don't fully know. It just sort of you just sort of find them where you find them. Like for me, sketchbooks are really important. Um, I'll always be doodling, like I say, and sometimes those doodles will spark something where I think, oh, that's quite good. Let's see where that can go, and then I'll just start daydreaming about it and making more doodles and stuff, and something will form from that. Notebooks as well, obviously, just making notes. I was always told to keep a notebook by you when you're in bed because dreams are like obviously and we forget our dreams very quickly. So having a notebook to sort of write them down, dreams can spark things off, and I guess that's it. It's just about finding that spark. Like an idea will never turn up fully formed. It might just be an image, or it might just be a character, or it might just be a line from something that you can then kind of run with and see where it goes, and it goes off into all these different directions, all these different story strands and stuff, and that's when it starts to get really exciting, when it starts from something very small like a sketch or like a line, and it just sort of expands and explodes into all these different directions. And that can kind of happen anywhere, like I say, sketching, writing, but sometimes just sort of walking the dog, or just riding on the bus or riding your bike or something. um, I think one of the things I really do believe in is that it's very important to get away from computers and get away from your studios and get away from your writing room and your desk and just go for a walk and just if you're kind of sitting down, right, today I'm going to come up with an idea, and I'm going to sit here at this desk until it comes. It just doesn't happen. It's kind of when you're out there experiencing life that ideas happen, I think. And so if if things aren't happening, just go for a walk, or just go and do something else, and go and do one of your hobbies, and go and enjoy life, and you know that. Oh, again, this is just personal for me, but that's when ideas start to form, and or at least when ideas will start to develop. Maybe you've got the beginnings of an idea and it's just not developing, it's just not coming. Sometimes just going for a walk and not thinking about it for a bit, and then suddenly it will snap into place.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a tricky one. Like, if I knew the answers to that, I'd be in a much bigger studio than this, that's for sure. It's just one of those crazy things that people have been struggling with since stories have been told. How can we tell this story better, or how can we tell this story in a different way? So yeah, I don't know if that even answers the question. Essentially, it's like, I don't know. But there are, we actually, when we was on the course, we did go through a few techniques, didn't we? And they're very, very simple things, like, the stuff we learn at school, kind of spidergrams and
Yes.
Venn
Yeah,
diagrams.
that was really interesting. I love doing
Yeah,
that because it just took you to places that you wouldn't have even thought of.
yeah,
So like thinking of a character and then what maybe what they're doing. Like I think of all the jobs or something they could do,
yeah.
for instance, and then
Well,
putting that together with something else. It's yeah.
that's it. Well, that was what sprung from the Bear and the Piano sketch. It was like these two things that are from completely different kind of areas of life. You got the bear who's like wild and from the forest and kind of grizzly, and then you got the piano that is sort of represents a kind of very sedate, very kind of cultured kind of life. Just slamming those two things together. And I think we did have two objects, didn't we, where we put them together? Was that in your workshop? I
Yeah.
think it might have been.
Well, I don't know. We spoke about them, didn't we? You had like sheets of paper, and then we picked out a character,
Yes,
and then an
that's
object.
what we
So
did.
yeah,
Yeah,
mine was a bear. So
yeah,
a bear and a ladder. So
yeah, yeah.
it's still working away in there, but I've not actually quite written that
Right.
down
Well,
yet.
it'll come. It'll come. Like I
Yeah.
say, sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it takes minutes. Sometimes it takes years. It's just one of those things that you can't kind of quantify how it works, but it
Hmm.
does eventually work.
Yeah, and I think like for me, I think if you're writing for children, being around children is an amazing
Oh,
inspiration. They come up with all sorts. So,
they're
like for instance,
bonkers.
Willow. But I need to write a story apparently called "The Big Bad Bum." So that's what I'm working on at the moment.
Well,
So yeah, so
title-wise,
that's interesting. So yeah, but I think there's a market. I think there's some publishers that love a toilet humour. So I'm going with it for now.
100%. Big
That's
bad
where I'm
bum.
going.
I think that's
Um,
marvelous.
yeah. But as well as picture books, you illustrate middle grade as well. So there's Chris Watercress at War is Over. How much different is it working with picture books to middle grade? Because
It's
there's
not
not in
a great.
spreads. There's
It's not a great deal different in terms of process. It's like
mm,
there's usually, well, actually, there's not usually less in. I don't know, really. I really do enjoy making middle grade books, and there's one coming out at the end of this month. 22nd, which is Island by David Almond, who I love working with. I've made a number of covers, and that's who I made War is Over with. And this is one that I made that's actually I created it in black and white, so I guess that's different from a kind of practical point of view. But I really loved working in black and white. There's a whole different set of rules working in black and white, and the challenge of still trying to get that kind of those lighting effects, but using black and white was really something I really kind of enjoyed kind of facing, really. So from a practical level, that was different. War is Over was also printed in black and white, but I actually made it in color because just wires got crossed somewhere and I didn't realize that it was going to be printed in black and white. However, it still looks good, and it's quite cool because there is talk that maybe one day there will be a full color kind of version of it somewhere down the line. So it kind of worked out. But no, for Island I did work in black and white and I loved it, and I want to work in more black and white actually, because I really found it a very atmospheric way of working. But I don't know. I guess you do sort of have to consider the age difference for the target reader. Like I mean, Cress Watercress is about a rabbit who lives in a forest or moves through a forest and encounters all these different other animal characters. So in terms of like the style and the look, that's not much different from a picture book. However, the story is very much for an older audience. Um, um, War is over. The artwork is a lot more graphic, so that wouldn't work for a picture book. So it's all those kind of things you have to consider about what would work for a picture book, what would work for a middle grade novel. But yeah, it's in terms of process, there's not a great deal different. But yeah, no, I do. Like I said, I do hope to work on more middle grade books. And in fact, I'm making my own middle grade book.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, apparently so,
Apparently so.
which is really exciting. And I think, I mean, again, I'm not approaching it too much differently, to be honest, from how, in terms of the artwork, about how I would um, create the pictures. But yeah, it's really exciting, and yes, I can't wait to share it with the world, but
Oh, I
whenever that may be.
can't wait to hear more. Because my next question was going to be asking you to tell us what you're currently working on, or if you're allowed to, anyway. Because I
Oh
know
yeah,
that it's
no.
a
So
bit
it is.
secretive.
It's really exciting, really. So I don't know what I'm allowed to tell you, really, but yeah, no, there's a few things that I'm working on, and I'm really excited. I like picture books. I will always make. I love picture books as an art form, and it's something that I'm always going to do in my career. I just know, it's just something I love doing. However, I'm also the next couple of years. I'm really excited to be going down these, doing something slightly different. So yeah, there's an MG novel which I'm working on, um, which is about. It always sounds weird, but it's about wrestling, Victorian wrestling. Um, but it's going to be so much fun, and visually, I can't wait to do it because I love the whole Victorian era. Um, so yeah, anyway, it's gonna be really good, and I'm really excited about doing that. Writing a novel is terrifying, as I think you're probably experiencing yourself.
Hmm.
Um, Very much out of my comfort zone with it, but again, kind of embracing the challenge. Um, and then yeah, the other thing I'm doing is a book that came out at Christmas was called Kid Christmas. Came out last Christmas, something I'm very proud of. Um, and I'm making the sequel to Kid Christmas, so that'll be my next picture book. But then after that as well, I'm doing some more MG novels, although they're kind of novellas. They're quite small, short
Oh, okay.
ones. Very much everything I'm doing, including the Victorian wrestling book, is
I
very
feel like I can
heavily.
picture them Victorian wrestlers. Like I can imagine what they
Yeah.
would look like.
Oh, me too. Well, that's the thing. For me, growing up watching American wrestling, everything was kind of. I mean, it's a really weird kind of subculture, but kind of American wrestling where everything's kind of fireworks and kind of big costumes and stuff. It's been quite fun, sort of transplanting some of that kind of excess into the Victorian era. And yeah, visually, I'm really having fun with kind of planning it all out and stuff. But then, yeah, so I'm going to also be doing these novellas, however you pronounce it, kind of shorter
Novella?
stories,
Are they novella? I don't know if it's right. I say novellas, I think, because
novellas. Oh, that's
yeah, I
good.
think I've watched a program and it was an American program. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, I
Let's
think they
go with
say
that then.
novellas.
Short stories, but yeah, everything I do is going to be very high, heavily illustrated, obviously, and very visual, and it's just something I'm very excited about. I've been doing this for 8 years now professionally, and it's almost like when you do something, you get out of your comfort zone. It feels like you're sort of starting again a little bit, and that's really exciting, but also incredibly terrifying. Um, but yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm very confident though that um, I'm going to put my all into it basically. So yeah, can't wait to get properly started on those.
Oh, I can't wait to find out more. I've just realised we're coming up to nearly an hour. I can't
Oh
believe how
wow,
it's gone so quick. It's been amazing. So I think I'll probably have to just close us down. That doesn't sound right, but
no,
yeah, just come to an end just because Instagram only lets me upload up to an hour, so we'll have
ah,
to cut it for an hour. And I did say to you, I think 15, 30 minutes, and we've just been chatting. So
it's
it's
been
been
wonderful.
yeah, I've really enjoyed chatting with you. So we'll just and I really appreciate that you've come on. You've shared so much with us. So thank you.
That's all right.
And
It's a pleasure.
can't yeah, and can't wait to see what's happening next with what you've just said. So um, I was going to switch you off, but we've literally got 10 seconds. So I'll
Oh,
quickly say
crikey.
next week. Next week, I'm being joined by Fiona Harding, and she has recently won or come third in a chapter book competition. So I can't wait to chat to her. So thank you everyone for joining us, and I'll see you soon. I'll see you next week. See you later.
Bye.